Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Thoughtful Bro. I'm so happy to have Jennifer Armentrout here today. This is so wonderful. I am in awe of this woman and of all the books she's written, and I am like heavily into the Blood and Ash series, and I find it completely addictive and captivating. And I almost had a hard time tearing myself away from it, even to do this interview with the author. So I can't wait to unpack all things Jennifer Armentrout today. But first, a few words. We are live streaming on A Mighty Blaze on Facebook and YouTube. As always, we're here on The Thoughtful Bro to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. And A Mighty Blaze, if you don't know, is an all-volunteer initiative that connects writers and readers virtually. We're not asking for money. If you want to show us the love, just follow us on social media, tell your friends about us, watch and like our videos, all the things. But if you do want to spend money, I have an idea for you. You can spend it on such highly addictive works of adventure and love by one of Romanticy's reigning queens. Books like The Primal of Blood and Bone, part of the world-conquering Blood and Ash series by Jennifer Armentrout. We'll put a link to buy Jennifer's books in the chat through bookshop.org, as always. And regarding questions, we'll probably have some time for some questions at the end. I know some have already come in, so just pop them in the chat and they will make their way to me. And now, on to this week's guest. Jennifer L. Armentrout is the #1 New York Times and #1 international best-selling author of over 70 books, including the Blood and Ash series. She writes YA, paranormal, science fiction, fantasy, and contemporary romance. Her body of work also includes the Titan, Lux, Origin, Covenant, and Dark Element series, as well as several standalone novels. She's won so many awards for so many of her books, it's too many to name here, but to pick just one, From Blood and Ash was the 2020 Goodreads Choice Award, won the Goodreads Choice Award in Romance. And as if all that weren't enough, she also publishes adult and new adult contemporary and paranormal romance under the pseudonym J. Lynn. She's the owner of the Apolycon and the Origin event author conferences. And also, just this year, she opened her own bookstore, Miss Willa's Bookshop, in her home state of West Virginia. We will talk about that. Her latest book is the 6th book in the Blood and Ash series called The Primal of Blood and Bone. She writes books almost as fast as I can read them. I'm so glad she made it to be here with us today. Jennifer Armentrout, welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I am so delighted you're here. I know you're coming to us live from your own bookstore, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But I just want to spend, this interview over the next hour talking about not just Blood and Ash, but also kind of your whole career and some of your experiences in publishing. I think you have like really interesting things to say about the publishing industry. So I can't wait to get into all of that. But for anybody who might be living under a rock and not know about Blood and Ash. The 6th book in the series just came out. But can you tell us, give us an overview of that world and what that series is?
I am always really terrible at doing, what they call the elevator pitch.
Right.
I'm always terrible about that. But like one of the thing that I came up with that kind of worked was imagine Game of Thrones if there were vampires and like other supernatural creatures. But it's definitely has obviously romance, but it has a lot of action. And it also there's a mystery involved, and that's one thing I've always liked about fantasy novels is yes, you have the action, you have the almost sometimes mythical creatures and things like that, but there's always a mystery that needs to be solved, and so it has all those different factors to it.
I mean, for me, what drives it forward is Poppy. She's, your heroine here. I love Poppy so much. She's like hungry for knowledge, hungry for experience, hungry for love. And she kind of over the course of the books comes into her own. Tell us as a writer, like, why do you like writing about Poppy?
I think the thing that really drew me to writing a character like Poppy is like the contrast of how she's presented to that world, as the virtuous maiden who is supposed to be submissive and also untouchable to the people. Like she represents the gods to the mortals.
Yeah.
And in reality, she's not that. Like, she's not, she's, coming to a point. And in a way, there's almost like this coming of age factor to it where she's starting to look around her and to begin to really question what she's seeing, what she's been told. And I also like that difference between someone who is, expected to be submissive, but in reality, she's kick ass. Like she's
Mhm,
not somebody you want to get on
mhm,
the wrong side of. And
mhm.
that right there, when I was kind of building the world and the characters, is that's what really drew me into Poppy. And I don't know about you, but it's like whether it's your characters that come first or the story itself, and then shaping the world to kind of meet what you're doing with the character.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like sort of story, and this is going to sound, I'm not trying to be cute, but it's like, it's sort of like the story and the character are like the same thing. It's like, I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, my story is the character. It's like what this character
Hmm.
does in this world. And I just feel like they sort of come at the same time
Yeah.
almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I always get asked like, what comes to you first, like the world or the characters? And a lot of times I have to stop and think, and I can't answer it because I don't know. Because to me, it feels like that they
Yeah.
come at the same time, and I do think sometimes it is the characters that probably pop in your head first,
Hmm.
um, and then it builds from there. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're like me and you're not really a plotter. So
Yeah.
you, as you're writing, it starts to flesh itself out
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think characters. I'm very character driven. Even when I'm going and reading
Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
I have to read something that is character driven for me.
Yeah. One of the things that just struck me so much about Poppy as a character is just like how under pressure she is. I mean, she's
Hmm.
just under pressure from everybody's
Hmm.
expectations, people who want her to be somebody, feeling that like almost in every situation she's in, the expectations are just sky high and the demands on her. And she's just so boxed in. And at the same time, just she's like a bottle of fireworks. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just there's so much happening inside her all the time. I mean, to live like 100 pages in Poppy's kind of soul is like, you just need to like take a breather after a bit. It's so intense, her inner life.
Yeah, and I think it's like obviously like when you're writing, it's like you have to set up all these different like conflicts, right? Or
Yeah.
tension. And especially in fantasy, that can be hard to do, like when you're also introducing readers to that world.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're setting the stakes and the state, so there has to be like this perfect mix of building the world so people understand it, um, introducing the characters, and then raising the stakes. So it's like you got to keep it interested. But again, a lot of that with the pressure she's under plays completely into what is expected from her. Like what is
Mm,
expected from her is almost like one of the driving forces for the series. And as the
yeah.
series goes on, she finds herself like constantly kind of like in a different situation where some people expect her to do a certain thing,
Yeah.
and fighting for that independence. Because I feel like even though it's fantasy, it's something all of us, like no matter like your gender, anything, like it's like you can relate to being put into these situations where people expect a certain thing from you,
Yes.
but you want to make that choice. And
Yes.
even if it is something you want to do, you still want to be making that choice to
Yes.
be the one doing
Yes.
it. And that's a huge theme with her.
Mm, 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 mm. The book begins, the whole Blood and Ash series begins in a famous scene called in this place called the Red Pearl. And I just
Mhm.
want, could you just like tell us, just give us a thumbnail sketch of like what that scene is? Because I want to talk about how great it is and kind of what your techniques are generally for hooking readers, because what a dynamite opening.
Yeah, so like your opening is like, oh God, it's like it is sometimes one of the easiest things I think to write, because sometimes you're lucky, right? And that's the first thing that comes to your mind when you're
Hmm.
thinking of a story. Other
Hmm.
times you're like, oh shit. It's like I don't know. Like, you have to write it like multiple times,
Yeah.
to get it right. But I really wanted it to kind of start off with this bang where you're introduced to her.
Mm,
And in a way, it was the best way for me to also do world building,
mm.
but in a very like you're like feeding little crumbs of it
Oh
into the
yeah.
scene, like when she's looking at the guards and
Hmm.
hearing that conversation. It seemed like a very organic way. And then of course you get the other main characters either mentioned by name or coming right into the story.
Right.
But yeah, I thought it also for me, it showed like here she was out the gate doing something she was not supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I felt that was a good way to set the tone for this, because I also knew that you were then going to see her as the maiden.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that you knew immediately, like, wait a minute, like,
Yeah.
yeah, that she's faking something here, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so she's this virgin, she's the maiden, she's also this
Mhm.
chosen one. She's wearing a veil and she's in a whorehouse and she walks
Mhm,
into a
mhm.
room and a very handsome man thinks that she's not who she is and thinks she's come
Yeah.
there for a different reason. And then in the dark, a whole scene starts to develop. And I guess my question for you about that is, you've written over 70 books and you just talked a little bit about kind of how you see openings and how sometimes they come and sometimes they don't, but just talk to me about like hooking a reader. Like, what do you think is the best way to hook a reader? Like, how do you feel? Like, do you have like a technique for it or something you always try to do?
I feel like no matter how many books you write, like I was saying, like not sometimes you get lucky and it
Yeah.
comes to you and you write it and
Hmm.
right? As a writer, I think you know when you got the best opening.
Yeah.
It's the same thing like when you got the best ending, like where you know that okay, this is it. For me, I think when I approach writing, I have to be able to visualize it. And so it has to, as I'm writing, it almost has to play like a movie in my
Hmm.
head. I have to see what I'm writing. And if I can't visualize it, something's missing at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to really rely on your instincts.
Yeah.
And there was a piece of writing advice that I had read, and I want to say it was something Stephen King had written, where it's like every chapter has to end with a cliffhanger. Like you want
Mm.
a reader not to
Mm.
know where to stop. Like you want them to
Mm.
feel like they can't stop here. They want to read it. They
Mm.
have to read another chapter. They have to read another
Hmm.
chapter.
Hmm.
And that was like the best advice that I ever read on
Yeah.
writing, was that
Yeah.
right there,
Yeah.
because it helps that helps with pacing. Like, and
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that actually would help with pacing when you
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
And I think being able to do that in the beginning helps. Like
Yeah.
that, I think, is what hooks that reader in.
Yeah. Um, so that's a great, incredible opening, and it really sets up the book and all the characters, and it sets up the tone and everything. But your books are on the longer side, and what's interesting to me is like how they do just keep moving and
Hmm.
how they do seem well structured, and it just seems like everything is sort of in the right amount and in the right order. And you're now we're doing this kind of scene, now we're doing this kind of scene. It's so expertly and cinematically kind of like moves from place to
Hmm.
place and from kind of storyline to storyline. So you mentioned earlier that I think you said you're not a real structuralist or kind of plotter. I am curious how this works. I mean, I was like I was in awe reading this book, and I was like, because I'm very analytical about structure. I find structure so fascinating, and I'm like, okay, well, the spine here. Let's just talk about book one in the series. I mean, the spine is the love story, right? I mean, you're like
Hmm.
steadily advancing through the love story, and I'm like, okay, well, that is like something that I can really follow. That is like steadily escalating, right? And you can kind of weave so much around that. But there are a lot of other things that are being woven around that, and you're kind of slowly giving us information about kind of who she really is and who he really is, and so on. So I guess my question to you specifically is just if you don't kind of plot it all out in advance, what is happening? Are you just kind of like trusting your instincts that it will sort of like organically end up in the right place, or how do you organize these big narratives?
So I'm going to be honest, like I wish I could plot from page one. I am envious of people who can do that. I've tried it. It's a hot mess. Like it's just, I get like, I feel like I get performance anxiety because I'm like, I'm supposed to come up with all this stuff right now. Like
Mm,
what?
mm, mm,
So, but here's the thing though, I do plot at a certain point in a book. Usually when I get to the end of the middle of the book is when
mm,
when you're hitting the third act,
mm.
that is when I will start to plot, because that is when the book, and after you write for a while, you start to know your own weaknesses. And
Yeah.
that's where I know like the book can get away from me. Like I
Mm,
could end up in the wrong zip code of this book if I
yeah.
don't at that point think about what do I need to have happen now in
Yeah.
this, and to close out this installment. um but with fantasy, it's very different, I feel like, than writing contemporary or paranormal, because again, you have that world building.
Mm.
And so how I always approach books, and I think like you could do this with anything that's a series,
Yeah.
is the first book, and this is what I say about myself, is not about readers, but I always say like my first book is like it's going to be fantasy for dummies at that point,
Hmm.
because you have to be really careful with that world building, that you don't
Yeah.
overwhelm people,
Mm.
because you don't have the space to really go into detail, or it doesn't seem like what I say is like the kitchen sink of world
Yeah.
building, where
Yeah.
you're just throwing everything at people.
Yeah.
And so I try to, like, for me, what worked was keeping them kind of in one location for a while, and then as they moved out of that location, that was a way for me to be able to really start expanding on that world. But there is definitely, it's like you do have to work at that mix of moving the plot along, because you have, when
Mm.
it's like romance and whatever subgenre, there are two different plots that are
Yeah.
happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure both are getting the same amount of screen time in a way. And
Hmm.
that can be a frustrating mix, because it's like if you're writing like a suspense novel, and it's like, okay, would these people really stop right now and to have sex if there's people chasing them? Like, what are you doing, right? Like, that can't happen. That's not realistic. And so it's the same type of thing where you have to really, like, is this going to make sense? Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, at least for me, because I'm the type of person who, if I'm reading that, I'm gonna be like, really, we're gonna be doing that right now? Like, I don't think that's wise. It's like, so it is a balancing act.
Yeah. Um, you brought this up. You said, you know your weaknesses as a writer. It's
Mhm.
too tantalizing for me to just skip over that. Tell me what you think one or two of your greatest weaknesses are. It sounds like one of them is like ending up in the wrong zip code if you don't think
Mhm.
seriously halfway through a book about where you're headed. But like, I mean, for somebody who's like sold so many millions of books and has so many fans, and I'm curious to see what are the weaknesses in your view.
Well, I think for me, again, is I know that, like, because I'm not a plotter, that the book can get away from me. The story
Yeah.
can get away from
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And while there is something exciting about that, because you do end up surprising yourself, and sometimes it leads to a really great place, and other times it leads to a complete nightmare
Yeah.
that requires you to rewrite 80% of your book,
Mm.
because who knows what you were writing this whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so that I don't, not being a plotter, I don't think that's a weakness, because for some people that's a strength and other people it's just not. But I think I know definitely I can be like way too wordy and things.
Mm.
And
Mm.
like I could never be a screenwriter. That would never
Oh,
happen.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've read screenplays, and I'm like, they just distill it down to basically dialogue, and
Mm.
that's
Mm.
just it.
Mm.
But I think one of my biggest weaknesses, and is that every time, like, this happens, like, every time I start a book, or anytime I take a little bit of time off from writing, it can just be a couple days, and I swear to you, it's like I forget how to write. Like, it's like self-doubt. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like no matter how many books you've written, no matter how many times you finished a book, no matter how many copies you've sold,
Mm.
there's this doubt of, does this make sense? Like,
Yeah.
do I still, does this sound like my other characters? I mean, all
Mm.
these voices that you kind of let into your head. And some people are really good about shutting that out and just trusting their instinct. But, I do think, like, I have to remind myself constantly, like, listen to your instinct, like, what you're
Yeah.
doing, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
not just spin your heels. Because I feel like, I mean, a lot of authors, it's like you almost have like imposter syndrome in a way, especially if you don't start out like the
Yeah.
normal traditional way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that kind of
And
stays
that's
with
how you
you.
still feel even now sometimes. Still
Oh
like there's
yeah. Oh
some
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
oh my
I like to tell
incredible.
people that goes away. It doesn't.
Oh God. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I want to keep moving because there's so many other parts you're writing that I want to talk about. And one of them is like just the use of tropes. And
Mm,
you have a degree in psychology, right? Like
mhm,
that's what you went to school for. Okay. So I kind of want to like come at the idea of tropes from that perspective.
Yeah.
Like, so there's just two to pick two: enemies to lovers and the chosen one. Those are both present
Mhm.
in Blood and Ash. And I know I've heard you say that enemies to lovers is one of your favorite tropes to write.
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of curious, like, so let's just like put on your like doctor psychology hat. Like, why does enemies to lovers work? Why is it a never ending source of storytelling, and people, no matter how many times they've heard it, they want to hear it again?
You know, and I'm glad you asked that because that makes me feel like all that money I spent didn't go to waste. um, you know, I think why people like that, I think it is people like watching other people have conflict. Okay, let's be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, yeah.
Personally, you know, not a good thing. Um, but I think we are entertained, I think, by watching other people's drama. It's
Mm-hmm,
like at the end of the
mm-hmm.
day. But I think it's that push and pull, right?
Yeah,
Of watching people that who do have a lot in common and, you know, but sometimes have too much in common where it's like you know, you can be too different and too alike at the
yeah,
same time. And
yeah.
I think that's what draws us in is that conflict of these are people who are more similar than they realize or want to admit. And I
Mm.
mean, if I wanted to get like super duper like psychology on it, I mean, you could
Yes.
almost look at it as like the id and the ego and stuff like that, where it's
Mm.
like one, it's like two facets of a personality,
Mm.
especially when it is the enemies to lovers. And I think one of the things that drew me to it is I grew up like, and I don't even remember anything about this. Like, I don't know how, because I think this was the early 80s. And I would have been like really super young, but I feel like my parents watched Moonlighting.
Mm.
And I feel like in the background, like, because I remembered like they constantly argued, right? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
and then I remember watching X-Files growing up
Yeah.
and just being like, this is not, you know, a romance, but like you were end up like watching Mulder and Scully and just be like, won't they just kiss? So it's like, you know, it's like you wanted them. And it was that type of, even if it's not enemies or lovers, it can be these
Yeah.
situations where these are two people who normally would not get along.
Mm.
And I feel like it's that conflict there. It's a challenge. And a
Yeah.
lot of people do want a challenge. They want to be challenged.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I used to tell bedtime stories to my kids. And one night I was telling this bedtime story, and my daughter, who was like 7 years old at the time, she was like not entertained by this evening's fare. And so I said to her after, I'm like, oh my God, I guess that was a pretty bad story. And she's like, I was like, what did I do wrong? And she's like, Dad, you just have to remember every night when you tell a story, someone either has to be falling in love or fighting. And it was like, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my, and you know, when you have enemies to lovers, it's like they're doing both. They're falling in
Right.
love and fighting. So you got everything you need.
Yeah, and you know, and I think too, again, it's there's an excitement to that, but also there's also humor, I think,
Yeah,
too, that you
yeah,
can find in writing or viewing those types of relationships. There's a humor to it.
yep.
But when you say it reminds me of The Princess Bride,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like when he's telling, I think it was Fred Savage.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. Yeah, exactly. I had many of those kinds of moments in my house. All right, one more trope, the chosen one trope. You know, this is uh, another one that is just people just seem to like. Even if people are like, oh, I've had enough of the chosen one trope, it's
Mhm.
like, give me the chosen one trope again, please. I think again, I want to hear your perspective from from a psychologist, but like, I think that people just generally feel like they do have some special destiny. There's something
Mhm.
special about them that I think deep down, even though people may be cynical on the surface, I think there's a profound belief or at least a yearning to feel
For
that
something bigger,
yes,
meant
and
for
that like
something,
your
yeah.
life you're meant for something
Mhm.
truly special. And maybe that's what it is. But tell me what you think about that trope and
Yeah,
why
I
it
mean,
works.
look, we all have a little bit of narcissism in us.
Yeah, yeah.
Like where it's yeah, I mean, I feel like no matter how cynical you are or nihilistic, you there is a little voice inside you that wants to be meant for something bigger, for
Hmm.
your life to carry more purpose.
Hmm.
And I think that's what creates that chosen one. And I mean, and there also is a level like the chosen one syndrome. Like, even though that's not like an exact term, but like there would be 100% like diagnoses that would be falling underneath something like that. But I think it's because we all want to be the one, right, that
Yeah.
saves the day or can do
Mhm.
it. And because a lot of times too is like when you read books that do have like the chosen one trope, a lot of times these are normal people. Like
Yeah.
they're not, and that's not always the case, like obviously, but like a lot of times these are people who are everyday people who real come to find out they've been chosen for something. And I think in that way we want to be able to be something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then on the flip side, like especially with Poppy, it's like you're supposed to be the chosen one, but in reality, you're really not. Like, and I like the flip side of that, where like you are told to believe that you're these things, and but you're starting to realize, but I'm not these things,
Yeah.
and what that does to you. Like, do you end up like being like, okay, whatever, or does that start to get to you that you're not living up to these expectations of
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the chosen one, I mean, I feel like deep down most people want to be um some level of that, like the
Yeah.
ability to make a difference. I think that's what it
Yeah.
actually starts to really go back to.
100%. Yep. That's exactly how I feel about it too. All right. I want to talk for a moment about romantasy and like the
Mm,
popularity of romantasy. And so this is like, as somebody who like runs a podcast about
mhm.
publishing and books, this is something that is like constantly talked about, that this is like the moment. This is like the best-selling genre of right now and maybe ever. It's just like this crazy thing that has taken over the world, romantasy. And in a way, I could ask you a question, and I want to hear what you have to say about kind of why that is. But there's part of me that's just like, is it really that mysterious though? Like what's going on? I mean, like romance has always dominated.
Yeah,
Romance is the number
romance
one
is
genre.
people are always so shocked when they
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
what
yeah.
is the highest grossing genre and the most highest selling genre, because
Right,
they could be two separate things. It's
right, right.
romance. It's always
Yeah.
been romance.
Yep. Yep.
And but here's the thing about fantasy romance. It's not anything new.
Yeah.
It's something that somebody one day said, "Oh, hey, take these two words, make one word out of it. It's cool."
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The
Yeah.
thing is, though, is that they had a problem shelving it, fantasy romance. So
Mm.
basically, you'd be shelved underneath romance genre. And then a lot of times you are shelved in young adult, even
Ah,
if you're like, oh, that should not be in young adult type
right,
of thing.
right.
And mainly it's because fantasy for the longest time was super dominated by very like male centric books that did
Hmm.
not have romance in them. And if they did, it was often used as a catalyst for something. It was never good.
Mm.
It wasn't going to end well. And a lot of those books too, if you were a woman, it was not going to end well for you in
Right,
those
right, right,
books.
right, right, right.
And I feel like what you were seeing beforehand is that they could not shelve them in fantasy because fantasy readers typically would not pick up a book that had romance in it.
Yeah,
So you would end
yeah.
up underneath what they used to call urban fantasy.
Mm.
So urban fantasy, it's like fantasy in the real world. So an example would be like Sarah Mass's Crescent City, like or like Nilini Singe's Angel series, or you would be shelved in paranormal.
Mm.
Um, and even if there wasn't really that many paranormal elements, it's because they could not shelve you onto the fantasy section.
Right.
But when the genre kind of got a relabel, got a new branding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But even still to this day, you will not often find them in the fantasy section.
Mm.
Every so often you'll see them creep over into certain stores, but a lot of times they're still in the romance section, which I don't care. At the end of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
day,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, but there's still this weird, like, well, that's not real fantasy. And it's like,
yeah,
what's real fantasy then?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you feel like, do you ever feel kind of like conscious of being part of some huge wave that is this romantasy thing? I mean, do you just feel like you're sort of, you know, in your office doing your thing and that's just what it is? Or do you feel like you're sort of part of something in some way?
You know, I don't think I don't think I'm part of something in that sense because I
Yeah.
feel like there are like for example, I feel like Sarah Maas's A Court of Thorn and Roses was probably the first one. And keep in mind there were fantasy romance before then, but this was
Mhm.
like there's always that genre breaker or that one that just breaks out and starts this like, wait a minute, we have to have a conversation because with her book, was not supposed to be originally in young adult
Mm.
and it was supposed to be a new adult, but you know they couldn't make that happen. Like,
Yeah.
like everybody tried to make new adult a thing, and for some reason, it was just like people could not grasp that this was certain years, whatever, and so it ended up into young adult when it really should have just went into fantasy.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was the first one that really started, you know, to break. Like it started grabbing fantasy readers,
Mhm.
and I think it's because like people have this view of romance and it's a very outdated, very like every stereotypical thing that you can say about someone who thinks romance is like, oh, that's not real, or that's not smart reading, or that it's like
Mhm.
you clearly probably have not picked up a romance book
Yeah.
in a very long time. It's like
Yeah.
the New York Times, without fail, every quarter they will go find some random person who has an opinion about romance who at some point in that article brings up Fabio. Like it's you know, I will bet money on this. Like it's like clockwork.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? Okay, first off, how old is that? Leave Fabio alone. Like this man is out there.
Yeah.
Like he like we're not, it's like you clearly have not even picked up a book
Yeah.
in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I feel like with fantasy romance, it started busting that almost that stereotype where it's
Mhm.
like no, romance books are just like every other book, they have a
Yeah.
plot.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
you know, and it's almost like that realization too, that like yeah, romance is not the only genre that has tropes. Every genre has tropes.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
There's a question in the audience from a woman named Melanie Borelli. Thank you for this question. She said she's just making an observation that if romance is such a high grossing genre, it doesn't make any sense that romance should be such a looked down upon genre as well. What's your, I bet you have thoughts there.
Oh God, yeah. I could spend all day. Yeah, I mean, the thing is there's a large swath of people who do not let it be known they read romance. That's
Mm,
like when you see the whole rise of discrete covers.
mhm.
Ebooks really helped with that so that you weren't walking around with Fabio on a
Right.
cover. And I
Right.
now
Right.
at this point I'm just going to use Fabio as an example. But no, but also, you know, this is I feel like a crazy thing, but also a sad thing. Very small percentage of people read now. It's a
Yeah.
very small percentage. Like it's a shamefully low amount, right?
Yeah.
That's still a shit ton of people,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
there
Right.
still is so many people. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of people would kind of like it is like they call it their guilty pleasure or like their
Right.
dirty little secret.
Right.
And sometimes when we call like I hate the word smut. I hate calling
Mm,
romance smut
mm,
because even though when romance authors do it and romance readers do it, it's a thing of respect. But the
yeah.
problem is you can't take ownership of a word where the genuine like the general populace know it as something else, right?
Mm,
So it's
mhm.
like when you say that, people think of like, you know, the dirtiest porn that you can think of.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
think when they hear that. um, but here's the thing too, is like it often um, doesn't even get the respect at the publishers
Mm.
a lot of times. Like you know, even if you're the genre that's paying those bills,
Oh my
um,
God.
yeah, it's a thing.
I'm,
It's
I
always been
mean,
a
like,
thing.
I think I was some, this is not a verified stat, but I remember just looking at some point and seeing that like Colleen Hoover was like a third of Simon and
Mhm,
Schuster's balance sheet or wherever she
mhm,
was being published. It was like, she was like making, I mean, she was really just entirely
mhm.
keeping the lights on at a whole big five publishing
I
house.
think
And
she at one point was
yeah.
selling more than the Bible, which is insane.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, and here's the thing, I will say this, publishers have gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
There still is that in some areas of publishers, like, especially when you start getting up to the higher ups in publishing, like,
Yeah.
your imprint, of
Yeah.
course, they're an imprint
Yeah.
that usually deals with romance, so
Yeah.
they're fine with it, but
Yeah.
they have gotten better, but there still is. I mean, and I
Yeah.
feel like that's not going to ever change. It's
Yeah.
it's always going to be like that.
Yeah. I want to talk about your readers for a second. You love your readers.
Mhm.
There's so many of them. I saw you say someplace that a series that really remained close to your heart was the Forbidden Game series. And what caught me about this is you said the final novel brought you to tears. And upon completing that series, you decided you wanted to have the same effect upon future readers. And I'm just kind of curious, like, is that sort of what you're really up to here? Like, you just like, if you can move readers to tears, I mean, what's your favorite thing to do for readers?
So I will say I'm definitely not like one of those authors who are like, "Oh, I feed on your tears." I'm like, "Shut up." Like, don't say that. But no, I'm not like that. However, here's the thing, like LJ Smith, that's the
Yeah.
author of The Forbidden Game. She also wrote The Vampire Diaries, which
Mhm.
was a TV show, but those books came out like in the 90s.
Yeah.
And those were the first book because I remember this. Like I'm sitting there, and this is embarrassing, but I'm sitting there. It's like Christmas. My parents had gotten me some of these books for Christmas, and I'm reading it. I don't realize at this time that they are watching Saving Private Ryan because why not watch that on Christmas? And it is the very beginning of that movie.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know what's happening. I'm over here crying about like a demon in a board game.
Yeah.
Everybody else is getting choked up because they're seeing this very realistic portrayal of war. And
Yeah.
my mom thinks that finally her child is having an emotional reaction to real. Yeah, I was like, oh no, that's not what I was paying attention to. It was like bad timing. But no, it was I remember sitting here reading this because like you, I have a very analytical
Yeah.
mind and I couldn't fathom because I'm like, I know this isn't real. This isn't
Mm,
real.
mm,
Why am I so upset about
mhm,
this? And then realizing that I was able to get so pulled into this world that it became real to
mm.
me, at least while I was reading it. And that is part of why, like, I wanted to be able to do that. It's the escapism. You can
Yeah.
escape. And I think we often forget, like, how important it is to be able to escape just for a few hours here and there, to be able
Yeah.
to disconnect from everything and
Yeah.
to be able to provide that because I needed that growing up, and to be able to provide that for other people is like a huge thing for me. But I feel like it's just wanting to be able to evoke any emotion from a
Mhm,
person because at
mhm.
that point when you get that, it's because it feels real to
Yeah.
them.
And I had that exact experience. I mean, just over the last, week or so, just listening to the absolutely incredible. We don't have time to like talk about how incredible the audiobook for this series is. That it's like, with full sound effects, full cast.
Oh,
I
the
mean,
graphic audios,
oh
yeah,
yeah, it's like an old
they're
fashioned
cool.
like radio play. I
Hmm.
mean, it's like, and I had this feeling of just getting like sucked right into it. Every time I put it on, I was just like, oh, here we are. Like, and
Hmm.
I was like it was just like walking into a dream. But I want to talk for a moment before we run out of time about a little bit about your career, because I think it's pretty remarkable everything you've done. I mean, I think you published your first book in maybe 2011, like not even 14 years ago, and you published 70 books since then. I mean, that brings up a lot of questions for me. Like, I have to understand how this happened.
Me too.
Yeah, but I want to start with. I know that you said like initially, like back in 2011 or before then, you had
Mhm.
trouble getting published. Can you just
Mhm.
talk? Can you talk about that? I mean, because like clearly, look what you've done since then. But even you had trouble at first getting a publisher, right?
Yeah, and I feel like most authors do, right? We
Yeah,
always hear about these crazy success stories where someone has multiple agents interested in them, and then
yeah,
they go to auction, and
yeah.
it comes out with a movie deal attached to it.
Right, right.
That's extremely rare.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that is slim to none. But I always like I wanted to be a writer since I was in high school, and
Mhm.
though like when I was in college, like obviously like all the stuff you have to read and do, I wasn't really doing that. And it wasn't
Yeah,
until like the late 2000s that I was like, I'm gonna try to. I think I was waiting for a book to come out, and I was like, let me entertain myself.
yeah,
I'm gonna write something.
yeah.
And then I decided I wanted to see if I could get this published. And
Mm.
I remember the first like rejections I got was like, it was exciting because it was like, I'm really doing this. I mean, I will
Mm-hmm.
admit it took me a while to work up the nerve to
Mm-hmm.
do that because then it
Mm-hmm.
became real at that point. But I started off writing in young adult, and young adult is a very, very hard genre to break into. And you really almost need a traditional publisher. Not so much anymore, but 100, I mean, still to a little bit now you do, for a couple reasons. But you have to, when you're in young adult, you live and die by like what the library will also carry, for example.
Yeah.
And teenagers, they often still buy physical copies. They also don't have like credit cards, right, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
go online and buy things. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
be in the bookstores, you have to be in libraries, and traditional publishing in young adults still has a pretty big hold on that. And so when I started going out, I was getting rejection. But another piece of advice I had read was somebody had said, about like when you're, out in submission, write something else, like work on something
Yeah.
completely different.
Yep.
And that's what I ended up doing. But I still have like every rejection that I won't get rid of the emails. It's over
Yeah.
like 159
Yeah. Yeah.
rejections.
Yeah.
My agent actually rejected me on one of my books, like first book I wrote, and then offer representation on
Wow.
another book. And I always
Wow.
like love to remind her of that.
Yeah.
But she rejected me first. But I started off with a small press, and
Yeah.
back in like 2011,
Yeah.
that market is nothing like it is today. Indie publishing wasn't really a thing. There was only a few outliers
Yeah.
who were able to do it. Small presses were not. Um, they were starting, right, but they
Yeah.
were looked heavily down upon.
Yeah.
When I hear, and I indie publish now and I traditional publish, but every time I hear an indie author who's just started in the last couple of years, I'm like, you have no idea how hard it was.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could not, you couldn't go to events.
Yeah.
Like you just weren't invited.
Yeah.
Reviewers would not read your books. Like it was just very much like looked at like you couldn't hack it. Like
Mm.
um, but I got very, very lucky. My first book that was with a small press, for some reason, because this is back in the day of book bloggers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and a book blogger somewhere read one of my books, and they really enjoyed it, and they started promoting it. Um, and it took off from there. And
Yeah.
I know this is cliche, but it is true. Like nothing beats organic word of the mouth. It
Yep.
cannot be replicated. It
Yeah.
cannot be forced. And um, if those bloggers had not picked up my books and started reading them in the beginning, I would not be sitting here today.
Yeah.
Um, and but it took a while for me to get the traditional book publishing deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but throughout doing all that, I think by starting out not the traditional way, it helps, I think, keep you grounded.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
kind of you have to really work your way up. And it also taught me like not to keep all my eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And because at that time I was a fast writer, like I was a ridiculously fast writer. I am not anymore.
Yeah.
But like when you don't pigeonhole yourself into one way of publishing, um, you can make it work for you
Yeah.
instead of you making it work for them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And yeah, so you're not like locked into only being able to do one book a year and things like
Yeah.
that.
Just to take it back for 1 second, one of the earlier things that you said that I think just a little nugget in there that I think just says so much is that you said you were kind of waiting for another book to come out. And so you wrote a
Mhm.
book in the meantime, just to entertain yourself.
Mhm.
And I just think that's like so key.
Mhm.
You were like, if you can make yourself interested in this, and then like that is just like such a great foundation, and it's just like so pure and organic. I just love that as kind of like an origin story for how things took off. But I have to ask this question about like how much you write. I mean, it's more than probably any writer I've ever had on the show. 70 books in 14 years. Just a few kind of quick questions on this topic. So number one, like in your day to day, like, do you have a kind of target? Like every day it's 2,000 words, or every day it's whatever it is. I'm just kind of like, what's your average output?
So it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
Mainly because like once you're writing high fantasy and you're writing 5, 6 books in, yeah, you just let go of those writing targets because not only do you have to write a book, you have to remember all the shit you said
Mm,
5 books ago
yeah.
that now don't make sense to you because
Because
you've
fantasy
forgotten that
readers
you
don't
wrote. Yeah.
forget.
Oh no, they do not. They will definitely remember when you don't.
Yeah.
Um, so back one of the things that I did, and I don't even know if this website is still around. It was called Quarry Tracker.
Okay. Yeah.
That
Query
was
tracker.
where,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's still
yeah.
around. Yeah. Yeah.
So there was so much great advice in there. Like one of the things I remember reading in there was like someone said, like, whether or not you work full time, you write full time, doesn't matter. You have to treat writing like it is a job, like
Mm.
where you're holding yourself accountable,
Yep.
like to
Yep.
getting a deadline.
Hmm.
So one of the things when I would try to write a chapter a day, or sometimes I feel like in the beginning it was a word count I would try to hit, and it would be
Hmm.
several thousand.
Yeah.
And then I knew I had to change that because even if I it didn't matter if I wrote a chapter, it didn't matter if these were great words. If I didn't
Hmm.
hit that word count, I felt like I was slacking. And so I realized that that can't be what drives me because sometimes you are only going to write 1,000 words or 500 words, but they're damn good words,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
you can't let that ruin you like that you feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So then I just kind of I've had to let that go, especially with writing fantasy.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's like you set yourself like a goal, like you writing a whole chapter can be a lot for someone starting out. That can be very overwhelming. So what I would always suggest is like write a scene.
Yeah.
Like doesn't matter how long that scene is. Try to finish a scene a day.
Mm.
And then if that works, like maybe steadily increasing that. But like I feel like you have to figure out like what works for you
Yeah.
because most people cannot write a chapter a day.
Yeah.
Um and so I feel like setting that as a goal,
Yeah.
you're gonna burn yourself out.
Now, what about like editing though and feedback? I mean,
Mhm.
if you're, putting out like several books a year, it's one thing to say like, a scene a day or 1,000 words a day, but then, there's revisions, right? And so I'm just like, at the
Mhm.
rate you're going at, how do you handle
It was
revisions?
very, very complicated schedules. So again, it's been a couple years since I've had like multiple books come out a year.
Yeah.
But back then, oh my God, it was very complicated schedules where
Mhm.
I was very lucky. All my publishers worked with one another. Like they
Yeah.
knew that if I have to finish this, like
Yeah.
so, like for example, I cannot be writing a book and stop that and do edits on another book. That
Hmm.
I'm just because my head has to be completely in
Yeah.
that book,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So it was very complicated scheduling. Sometimes my agent would handle it, but I always got lucky. Like I feel like the editors, like they knew like when I could work on things and when I couldn't. Um, and always, especially with traditional publishing, like your editor is always going to be late
Yeah. Yeah.
sending out
Yeah.
stuff to you. So like you always have extra time.
Yep.
Um, but you know, you end up having, but also, I mean, I was writing every day and I'm
Yeah.
still writing every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was 7 days a week, 10, 15-hour days of
Yeah.
writing. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that came from like feeling like, because writing is such a subjective thing, right?
Yeah.
Success in writing is so subjective. And it's a type of thing that could end at any time. At
Yeah.
any time that
Yeah.
rug could pull right out from beneath you.
Yep.
And so there was like this pressure of like, well, I got to do this now. I got to do this now. And
Mm.
I mean, it worked for me luckily then, but like now there's just no way I could do that. But
Wait, and just to be
yeah.
clear about what you said 7 days a week, 10 to 15 hours a day.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, people think I would be exaggerating. I could bring out a list of people here and be like,
Yeah.
"Is it true?" I can't even tell you even now.
Yeah.
Like, I want to say like I took like a couple weeks off this year or last year.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I probably took anything longer than like a week off
Yeah.
in a decade. Like it's because yeah, because like thing is when you sign contracts
Yeah, yeah,
Like you can delay it up to a point
yeah,
before like they're like, hey, we budgeted for this. Or
yeah,
but also there is the like the unspoken contract with your readers. They are expecting something to come out. And I mean, we obviously I've had to delay things because things, just don't work out. But
yeah.
like, yeah, it was a lot. Like I look back and I'm like, how did I do that?
Oh my
Like
God,
I don't even know
it's
how I did
incredible.
it.
It's
Um,
incredible.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it helped build up a backlist pretty quickly.
Amazing. I want to go back to publishing for a second. You're what's called a hybrid author in the sense that you've
Mhm.
self-published, you've done indie, you've done traditional. Sometimes you're doing them all at the same time. I know that you have strong feelings about the publishing industry, and
Mm.
I think I've heard you say that it's archaic, and maybe it's one of these things that like needs to be burnt down, and you just start over. But I guess my question to you is just. It's not just going to obviously start over. If you could like be president of publishing like for a day, right? Like with all powerful. Like what?
Mhm.
Name one or two things. What would be like first on your list for what you'd change about the publishing industry?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't pick just one thing.
All right, maybe three or
Like,
four.
yeah, right. But I think, I mean, there's a lot of things I would want to fix in publishing that have really people think has nothing to do with the book that ends up in their hand,
Mm,
but it does. Stop making your employees work in New York City. It is
mm,
the stupidest thing ever.
hmm.
They're editors. They just
Yeah,
need a computer, an
right.
internet connection. They don't even
Yep,
need an internet connection half the time.
yep.
And the reason why that is so important because that limits who they can get to work at that publisher.
Hmm.
And that limits what type of books they're going to get. It's going to
Ah,
limit who writes those books.
yep.
You have to be able to afford to work in publishing. They get
Hmm.
paid crap. Like they get like starting out, like especially living in a place like New York City.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know how they do it. Now we are starting to see that they're allowing like kind of a hybrid.
Hmm.
I think it's like one of the good things. I hate to even say that came from COVID, but it was to show that look, people are adults. They can work from home.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to be out here throwing parties at their house when they're supposed to be working.
Right.
Um, but that is one thing because it really affects everything. Every book that ends up in your hand, somebody had to read that and either A, have that experience or they'd relate it to it,
Yeah.
whatever. But honestly, another thing would be their printing schedules
Yeah.
because that is what's so archaic about them.
Right.
They have these printing schedules that require them to send a book X amount of months in advance to the printer. The printer doesn't print at that time. The printer normally won't print until it's within a time frame before the release because no one wants to hold these books in a warehouse because then they have to pay insurance on that.
Right.
So what that creates is the inability for them to print and publish faster. And
Hmm.
it's not just them because then the issue becomes the bookstore
Hmm.
and how they turn over space
Hmm.
and so like that. So I feel like how they've done a lot of things that has worked in the past that no longer work, and I understand why they can't do it because it's a much bigger like like it's like they're this big wheel and they have all these
Hmm.
spokes on them
Hmm.
that are also very much stuck in that way
Hmm.
because some publishers have in-house printers. And when it's like an in-house printer, it's not at their location, but it's a
Hmm.
printer they use solely for
Hmm.
publishing. Other publishers basically lease out printers, and you would be shocked to know how few printers there are. Um,
Yeah.
and so it becomes this massive like backlog because again, they all publish their lead titles at the same time.
Right.
Why? Nobody knows. Because
And
that's the way it's been done.
I think there's a great story about Blood and Ash that like you sort of went to a different publisher, an indie publisher, and you
Mhm.
said like, "Hey, I want this book released in like 6 months or
Yeah,
something,"
that
right?
wasn't even 6 months. I was like, because I did work with them
Yeah.
for a novella and I had gotten to know them like, on a personal level. And so I like had called up Liz, one of the owners, and I
Yeah.
was like, look, I have this idea, I mean, I have this book, and I feel like it's either going to be a huge thing or it's going to be nothing. It's going to be terrible. There will be no in betweens. I was like,
I feel like
but
that's every book, but
yeah,
okay.
right. Yeah, like there'll be no in betweens on this. And
Right.
um that was in December of
Yeah.
2019. And I was like, because I knew that there was a gap in fantasy romance at that
Yeah.
time. I knew
Yeah.
that there was no books coming out. And I
Yeah.
said, it has to come out in March or April of
Mm-hmm.
2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, can you do it? And they were like, well, let's see. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and they were able to do it. And then there was the thing that nobody could plan for was at that when the book came out, something else was occurring in that exact time in
Yep.
2020.
Right.
And it was this weird storm of things that, that I even hate saying it because I hate saying that like it came together because so many bad things were happening.
I know.
But more people were home, more
Yeah.
people were on their phones. Book talk exploded
Yeah.
at that
Yeah. Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And it became this things that all came together.
Right. And then last question for me before we take a few audience questions here. You're in West Virginia and you just
Mhm.
opened a bookstore this year. Can you tell us, like, I'm kind of interested in that, framing that as sort of a follow-up question to my question about publishing. Like, how
Mhm.
does you having your own bookstore sort of maybe help you address some of the issues that you see with the publishing
Yeah.
industry?
Well, first off, I now understand why people get mad that they don't put series title numbers on books. Like my publisher stopped doing that,
Yeah.
and I never really thought of it. Right now, as
Yeah.
a bookseller, I'm like, I don't know what order this is supposed to go in. Now I got to go to Amazon, Goodreads, someone to tell
Yeah.
me like what
Right. Right.
order.
Right. Right.
But like yeah, there's things like that that you don't even think about,
Yeah.
like but you do understand too the spacing issues. Like you only have so much space.
Mm.
But it's actually been really fun. Having that, that experience. I think the funniest thing for us is that, especially when you're starting off and you're, building your bookshop,
Yeah.
you're going to realize you're going to forget how to do ABCs a million times.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of us, like we all have one area of the alphabet we all got messed up at. Like mine for
Mm-hmm.
some reason was the H's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and it was just because you're tired and you're just
Yeah.
like, and you would hear us going A B C D, like trying to like to do that. But yeah, I mean, you understand like the shelving issues, but there's things like, again, as an author, you don't think about like the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
series title number.
Yeah.
Like why? I mean, I know why they stopped doing that,
Yeah.
because they don't want you to pick up book five, realize you haven't read four books. They want you to buy book five
Right.
and then
Right.
feel
Right.
like you got, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know
Yep.
why they're doing that, but
Yep.
yeah, that's like, please stop doing put the numbers on the books.
And one last thing about the bookshop, I know that you've kind of designed it. I mean, we were talking about the Red Pearl earlier, like the
Mhm.
big opening scene of the series, and you said, you tried to design your bookshop after the Red Pearl, and you've got a bunch of kind of like little
Mhm.
Easter eggy things in the bookstore. Just talk for me for a second about how you're trying to make it an experience.
So, the bookstore is not a huge space.
Yeah,
And with it being a romance centric bookstore, I also knew that I wanted to make it like an experience. I want it to be something that every time you come in, you notice something different.
yeah,
So because the Miss Willa is a character from the series, so we knew that we had to do something that kind of paid homage to it. And so
yeah,
it's kind of like, the Blood and Ash series built this
yeah,
bookstore.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was cool working that in there. But there's all kinds of things in here that we have,
yeah,
just little shelf things, things readers have given me over the years.
yeah,
You can see out on shelves and things like that, just kind of used as bookends. But yeah, so we wanted to make an experience. And
yeah.
we're also doing Miss Willa's boutique, which
Okay.
is an Airbnb, but I can't call it an Airbnb for some reason.
Yeah.
But it's right next door. It's
Oh, that's
literally the
awesome.
house right next door came up for sale. And so it's like a book themed Airbnb. So everything in the house is themed to books.
And
And
like
so
I can, like, any person can just rent it.
eventually, yeah, it's not ready yet. We're
Okay.
doing
Okay.
some crazy things to it right now.
Oh,
There's hidden rooms we'll have in it. Like it's going to be like an experience for people to come to it. And because it was very serendipitous, like
Yeah.
how this house, the whole thing happened. It was just a random. I mentioned it, and Melissa was like, the house next door is for sale, and I was like, oh, really?
That is
And
so cool.
yeah. So, but again, it's like an experience where
Yeah.
it's like, it's you look forward to finding new things.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. All right, let's take a few quick questions from the audience. This is from Kimberly. Thank you for this question, Kimberly. What are Jennifer's plans for a sequel to A Fall of Ruin and Wrath?
So a fallen Rin and Wrath is the world is tied to the Blood and Ash world. Like you don't have to read both series to understand it. However,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain events that happen in one series that if I had the sequel come out, there would be something spoiling there that would
Yeah.
not make sense if you read both series.
Yes.
So that's going to come out after the next Blood and Ash book comes out. So
Okay.
you know, I don't want to say a time frame because it all depends on so many factors that can change between now and then publishing wise. Because that is with a different publisher. But it'll be coming out after the
Yeah.
last Blood and Ash book.
Okay. Awesome. Let's take one more from Robin. With that kind of pressure to produce, are you having any fun? What do you do for your you time?
I mean, I'll say there was a point in my career where I had to realize that I wasn't celebrating any successes that I achieved.
Mm,
It was always on to the next thing, on to the next thing.
yeah.
And that can get to you after a while. It's not good for your mental health because
Yeah.
you end up making yourself feel like it's never enough. Like I
Yeah.
have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So I had to really step back and make sure I stopped writing by a certain time. But because I'm sitting all day, I love to be outside or doing something. So during
Yeah.
the warmer months, I'm always in the garden. So I'll I'm happiest with a shovel digging up soil. Like it's like that's, and we do have a small farm of
Yeah.
useless animals. Like I have sheep, goats, and alpacas, and 2 llamas
Mm-hmm.
that really don't do anything other than look like they're about to spit on me. But that helps me like get out of the house and kind
Yeah.
of, because like it's hard sometimes to read because that can make you feel like you're working. So I listen to a lot of podcasts
Yeah. Yeah.
and just kind of do physical things because I just been sitting all day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah.
All right, great. Well, look, we are out of time here. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. I have one more question of my own that I like to ask everybody who comes on the show. So, Jennifer, imagine that somebody, let's just take the Blood and Ash series. Imagine you have like the ideal reader for that series, just somebody who is like being moved by it, getting it in just the way that you hoped a reader would get it in your wildest dreams. And just imagine that they've read now all 6 books. Tell us, like in a phrase or even a single word, after having read these thousands of pages across these 6 books, they get to the end of the series. How does that reader feel?
Satisfied.
Mm.
I want them to feel like they've come at the end of the journey and they're satisfied with the journey to it.
Yeah.
And I want them to be able to look back on it and have it not felt like they wasted their time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would want them to feel satisfied.
And I would just say, like, having only read the first couple, it's just amazing, like how satisfying those are in and of themselves, and I think it's one of the great tricks that you have, that you're able to kind of like make each book satisfying and then the whole thing satisfying. So, Jennifer, this has really been wonderful. Truly, it's an honor. I mean, I just, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to an author and I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, I get what they did. I sort of get how they did it. But with you, I don't know if I feel that way. I look at you and I'm like, how the hell did she do it? I'm in awe.
Life.
I'm in awe. All right, that's it. But Jennifer, this has been such a pleasure. People, please buy Jennifer's books. Please visit her bookstore and maybe her Airbnb. That sounds like a great kind of couples getaway sometime in the near future. So I really appreciate you having come on the show today, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's been fun. See you next week.